So next on stage, I welcome Ole, and he's gonna pitch in detail. Welcome.
Okay,
Ben, I'm a little bit looking into the future of technology.
Yeah, where are you, Heiner?
But it's very loud here. It's hard to hear you.
Where are you, Heiner?
I think I go out for a moment.
Wo sind Sie?
Trying to do my best. So let me say a few words about in detail. Our company was established in 2009 as an IT company, and most of the companies who were established at that time, they were doing software development for the business, game development, and mobile development application. And a few years ago, we started to work with blockchain development. So, and we find that this will be really future for the whole distributed platform.
So it looks like Heiner is just walking the show. How are you, Jaswinder?
I'm very good, Sam. Nice to see you again.
Excellent to see you.
Thank
Thanks
you.
for the brief one-on-one, following up from last week. I've been actually noodling on one of the diagrams that I showed. I think it's the one I showed last week.
Right.
So at some appropriate point, I would like to share some of the developments on that diagram.
I prefer your diagrams than to Colin's diagrams. Much simpler, much easier to follow.
I am a simpler man.
I have a question. You don't have to answer it
Yes?
right away, or if at all.
Yes?
Are you somewhat clear in your mind what direction you want to be going in?
I have about 2 or 3 directions and then a very large project. So I am, yes, I am, I wouldn't say I'm absolutely correct, but I have some firm directions that, either good or bad, occupy my mind, yes.
Good, good. I'm glad to hear
If it's not evident through these discussions on Saturdays, then I apologize. But to me, there's always a sense of where I'm trying to go and where I'm leaning. And I think you might pick up on that from time to time.
I did pick up on that from time to time, and then we seem to lose the thread, and we're wandering all over the place, and then you bring the various people onto track again, and somebody else disturbs it. There's a lack of, the collective memory is not good. I'll put it that way. I'm complete.
Well, this issue of shared group memory is a, shall I say, favorite topic of mine.
Yeah.
And so long as we have no agreement on shared group memory, we have shared group, is it, it's not anemia, but it's, what is it? Anemia is lack of iron, but what's the word for lack of memory? I know this word, you know, but I can't recall it right at the moment. Anyway, Amnesia, sorry. So we have shared group amnesia instead of shared group memory. So that's why we wake up and it's like Groundhog Day all over again. We have the onboarding conversation. We have the recording conversation. We have the interruption conversation. We have the inclusion conversation. We have the industrial frame conversation. We have, I mean, we can number these conversations now and probably find multiple instances of it in the last 2 years of videos. Howsoever, I would like to share something, but let's do a quick round of optional check-ins if we like, okay? Heiner, are you at a place where we can actually hear a check-in from you, or is the walking of the floor, you're frozen now? Yeah, okay, you're not frozen anymore. Hey, T. Okay, Tis, what you're seeing from Heiner's video is evidently he's at a show. I'm not sure which show he's at. Just wonder, did you and Heiner have a chance to share anything before I joined? Heiner, what show are you attending? Okay, you look frozen again.
Seems to me Heiner's at the start. Out! At the start of the conference, there's a lot of noise there, and there's some noise here, and we haven't talked about anything.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, so I see that, let's see if Heiner's still here. Yeah, he's still here, but invisible, and Tis is invisible.
Yeah.
So
that leaves two of us, and you're in charge. Off you go.
Well, as you recall, 2 weeks ago, I shared some diagrams, and I have a refinement of one of those diagrams that I'd like to show based on a lot of the feedback that I collected in that session, and also some further noodling on my own part. But Tis, Jaswinder, would you like to have optional check-ins? And I will. Okay, go ahead, please.
Well, my check-in is that I'm having a wonderful Saturday. I've had the house electrics checked. Some work needs doing, so that'll be rectified soon. I went to the church, had a nice chat, caught up with some of the stuff I wanted to catch up with over there. That'll be ongoing. Then I took a bus to the city center, walked around, went to the library, bought some fresh fruit. And then I went to have a chat with a friend. And then I skedaddled over here just in time, rushed a bit and put the PC on and bang straight into the meeting. So I'm having a very good day. Thank you. Complete.
Excellent. Excellent. Tis, how are you?
Yeah, I need to take some food first, and then I will come back with the camera. So I'm listening now. I'm taking some food now, and here I'm making some compost, not at my fifth floor flat, but somewhere else. So I'm experimenting with making compost. So for the next few months.
Cool.
So that's all.
I would like to do that myself. I've not yet gotten to do that, even though for 3 years I've been saying this. And here comes Alex. All right, Heiner, any introductory remarks?
Yes, I was lost at the IFAR, that's the Consumer Electronics and Telecommunication Fair. I think it is much worse than whatever. And I got lost in one of the halls. There are about many. And I just wanted to use my being here for a moment as a teaser to one day have Sam come with all his people here to Berlin to make something good with technology. I'm here because we had a pitch on socio-cultural, innovative, civic, systemic entrepreneurship, how to make good in a philanthropic, giving sense. And as I feel barn raising is the most interesting for me, I feel I will listen in a little bit more, but I have a meeting in the press center in a moment. So I will only listen and jump in or muscle in when I feel I cannot resist Thank you for touring with me the fair. Over.
Yeah, thanks for giving us a view of it. And Alex, I know you haven't yet had a chance to check in, but Heiner, may I ask you a follow-up question? And that is, if you're going to drop off, approximately how long do you have to stay here? Because I would like for you to at least see the diagram, at least for a few minutes before you drop off.
Okay, no, I will hear you, but I have to move on the campus here. And when you say diagram, I try to be with you.
Okay, then let me let Alex check in, and then I'll dive directly into the diagram. Okay? Alex, would you like a optional check-in or not?
I'm here. I'm here and listening. I'm ready for a barn raising episode 963. Yeah. And not much more to add than that at the moment.
Okay, thank you. Just a few brief remarks. Tomorrow I leave to go to California again for 6 days this time, so a little bit longer than usual. So later today, I have to prepare my daughter and the neighborhood for that, which is a little bit difficult because my oldest dog, Zeus, you may have seen, he's come down with cancer. And I'm going to call a few oncologists today and see if any treatment could be possible. It may not be possible. So the next week for me may be kind of touch and go, because if my daughter has to deal with very serious complications for Zeus, that might be difficult. So that's what's on my mind right now. But as pertains GCC, I'm actually very curious to get some reactions from you, because I've taken one of the diagrams that I shared with you last week, I believe, and out of the collected feedback, I reorganized some things. I put some boxes in different places. I colored some boxes differently. I associated them differently, and it came up with a derivation of that diagram. So I'd like to walk through that with you. And so I'm going to share this window right now and see if that makes sense to you. So I'm going to share this Axon window. Let me know if it comes through. So let me know if you see something.
Yep. Yeah, yep.
Okay, so thanks. So I'm going to zoom in here on the upper left here and sort of walk through it by color. So the last time we did this, we kind of started with this elimination of power culture idea, you know, the stuff that's right here, okay? And so I just wanted to back up a little bit and say, well, behind that is a number of things that I consider obvious, and Heiner and, you know, other people probably see obvious, and there's probably a much longer list than this, but I wanted to identify some of the maladies in the world that seem to trouble us, right? There's widespread suffering, but it's driven, I think most of us are beginning to understand, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it's driven by this slavery mentality, which we thought we eradicated, but is actually just present now in a different form called capitalism, okay? We have it driven by corruption and selfishness and power madness, which ultimately is driven by greed. And that's what's created this slavery conditions, which, because of all the technology we have, we think we're so free, we're so powerful, but economically and from a humanistic standpoint, I still think slavery exists in a widespread form. And that's why we have suffering, okay? So that's why I wanted to provide that background into this focus, which I started with last week, which was, how do we then rectify that? Part of it means we have to think about a different set of values, primarily eliminating power from controlling the health of the 8 billion here on the planet. And I think it's that that power culture, I'm abbreviating in speech. It's that power culture that has propagated and solidified the system, which is basically, even though it's called capitalism, it's nothing in my mind more than an escalator for money to be, you know, escalated up to the rich. And that's what's created first the 10%, then the 5%, then the 1%, then the 0.1%, now the 0.01%, and now the 0.001%. So it's done a very good job of taking wealth, taking assets, and really concentrating wealth and power up at the top. And that's what capitalism, to me, has done. So I then say, well, some of us are seeing a need to change. What is that change? What is that set of things which is kind of counterbalanced to the set of greed and power madness and selfishness and whatever, okay? So the words that I came up with were words like coexistence, consciousness, compassion, and then rather than power concentrated in a few, we want power to be distributed among the many, which indicates this collaboration notion. And if we're going to collaborate without working at cross purposes, that's why I think this co-visioning thing is so important. So that puts this top half of this diagram in context. Now, I could stop there. And I think that's relatively well known from an awareness standpoint. But I'm going to continue down into the lower half of this diagram, because once we have that, and once we realize if we really want to distribute decision-making, action-taking, power, values, then we rely more on people's personal agency, because we don't want to focus so much on this might makes right idea. Might has certainly made right, and that's how power is concentrated in the few. So if we want to see a society where more of us have a say in how we can take society and community forward, that's where we introduced this notion of personal agency, which means now if we're going to act, what is our motivation? If it's not going to be externally imposed, how do we internally generate that fire, that energy, that direction of action, okay? So last week we had collected a number of things here in this visioning piece, okay, which I think supports this need for change, okay? What I heard identified was avoid self-extinction, eradication of war, elimination of hunger. You can read all this, harmony, paradise on earth, community. So this is what we collected. And one of my theses that I would like to make more prominent is that we don't need single visions, but we do need coherent and compatible visions. That's why I call it co-visioning rather than simply visioning, okay? So if we have compatible visions and compatible values and missions and objectives, then at least there's some approximate alignment that I think we want. I think perfect alignment is approximate. I think tight alignment is not perfect. So there's an interesting conversation I would like to invite in there, okay? So that loose alignment allows us to cohere, to resonate, to mutually support, to mutually amplify, and therefore not to waste our energies working at cross purposes. Knowing that at any moment we are imperfect in our understanding of what we're trying to do, what I'd like to see is an approach that basically is open to learning, open to improvement. In other words, we self-evaluate, we look at how we're performing, we understand what's happening, we observe, and then we look for areas where we can make tweaks in what we do, what we think we're all about. And that learning mode, that improvement mode, dare I say, the scientific method behind it, is one that I would like to see embraced by people who are really trying to help society move forward. And if that is the case, then my question is, if I really want to be so accountable to myself, if I really want to work on these objectives, if I really want to be this open and collaborative, are there others like me? And that's what leads me to think, I want to find people like this. And that's the placeholder I'm using for this term. Sorry, the term I'm using for this placeholder community is the community of impact. So I heard somebody, I think it was Josh last week, say, hey, if you really go down the whole set of questions, there's the why, the who, the how, the when, the where, I think there's like 6 of these questions. What I'm really thinking is the most important for us to begin with are the why, the who, and a partial how. Because I think much of this is trying to roughly and loosely align what each of us is doing. I think tight alignment begins to require this centralized, power-hungry model of human organization. So right now, I'm not saying that we need a strict how, we just need a number of compatible hows. So I'm focusing right now on the why, which is the co-visioning, the who, which is the community of impact, and the how, which is we approach this thing with compassion, consciousness, coexistence, collaboration, co-visioning, and learning and iterating our improvement in mind. So that is my story through the diagram, basically incorporating a bunch of the feedback that we all discussed last week, and I sort of rearranged, reorganized, recolored, relaid out. And so that's as far as I've gotten. Now I know there's more, and there's definitely parts of the story I told elsewhere, but as far as the diagram last week and where we got some feedback and what I've been able to do with the feedback, this is what I'd like to share with you today. So thanks for listening, and I would like to shut up now and do more listening. Over.
While you've got the diagram up on the screen, I'm looking for a spot where I could put in a word, what is it, citizens assembly. But I'd leave that to you. I don't know which part of the diagram it would fit in properly. Because that citizens assembly seems to be a powerful way of getting the truth heard in the halls of power where the corruption is.
Okay, so this is, let me see if I hear you right. This is like working within the system to promote change, to promote some of the values that we hold. Would that be a rough, approximate way to understand citizens assembly?
It would. They have a selection on the panel of the, or they call them the moderators, that are independent from any government or political organisation. So their objective is to achieve a more truthful outcome.
Okay, thanks, Alex. I've put it for now here in this individual visions set of things, and we'll see whether or not it belongs there or whether it could move. Okay.
I have a slightly different take on this. This is excellent, and we can work on this. We can work with this. Your visioning is very good. In the why section, I would like the why to be, why do the ruling classes, the 0.01% or even the 0.001%, that would be the people like the World Bank, the International Monetary Fund, I'm not sure about the United Nations, because I think that's a dog without any teeth at all. It's just sucking up the American arse, as far as I can see. NATO is another one that's just an American. It's an American fighting machine that the rest of the NATO members have to follow. So that may come into the equation. Why are they doing what they are doing? Those who are waging war continuously. And these are the likes of Mr. Ford and others. The names escape me, but there's a huge list of them. And they're less than 100 people, really. And probably bring it down to the 10%, probably about 10 people somewhere who must know what strategy they are employing. I am only guessing at it, and I could give you those guesses and we could list them if you want to. And that is that, as I mentioned earlier, reduce the world population, keep the stock that they want, that's the human stock, at the level of education they want, which is useful for them to do. And you mentioned the slavery bit, be their slaves, and that's it. Is this the old biblical vision they want? What is it? That's the quest I would like to be included, and I'm happy with the rest of it, Sam. Thank you very much. Complete.
Sorry, Jaswinder. This one box called "Why do the ruling classes?" and then that went on quite long. So I was wondering, is there a concise way you would like for me to capture that in this box? That was a question for you, Jaswinder. You're on mute, by the way, in case you're speaking. Oh, maybe you're frozen. Oh, sorry, Jaswinder. I think you were frozen when I was asking that question. Did you get my question?
Repeat the question.
The question was, when you started with the statement, why do the ruling classes, the 0.001%, etc., and then that actually went on for quite a while and was quite long. So I was wondering if there might be a succinct form of it that you want me to use.
Okay, here's the succinct form.
Yeah.
The very few people at the top, and we're looking at less than 2 handfuls really, between 10 and 20 people who are in absolute charge, in charge. Why are they doing what they are doing with the world population? Why are they making these decisions which are wasting so many lives, and at the same time they are raping the planet for a few dollars more? That's as much reduction as I can do.
I think we know the answer to that question. It's
What is the answer to that question?
It's up there at the top of the page.
What is it?
Power madness, selfishness, greed, and corruption. So, which part of your anatomy which part of your anatomy would you like the ruling class to kiss?
There's more to this than that. There's more to this than meets the eye. There's a version they're giving to keep us quiet or acquiescent, and then there's the horrendous version they are following, and we have no idea what that is. It's a duality game.
I mean, this might be so obvious to me, but it may not be obvious, or maybe I am wrong. But it seems to me that the power elite has zero value in the lives of normal people. The lives of normal people, you know, the bottom 20%, the bottom 50%, don't matter. I mean, why else would you understand or interpret elimination of healthcare, elimination of clean water, elimination of housing, elimination of means for living? How else could you interpret that other than by saying the people in charge don't value those lives? Those lives are worth wasting. They are expendable. That's how I interpret this. Maybe I'm too bleak and cynical. I don't know. What do you think? Over.
I would go. I understand what you're saying. I confer with what you're saying, and I would go even further. And I mentioned this report, perhaps not as succinctly as I ought to have. There is a report flying around that the optimum number of people that this planet can support at a fairly high level, high standard of livelihood, by that I mean the American standard, which they're enjoying currently, and they want to keep that, and that obviously is including the advanced countries. The figure that is being bandied about is between 4 and 6 billion people. No, hello, Dave. Nice to see you. Chomping away again. I'm glad to see that. That will definitely reduce your weight. 4 to 6. So we're talking about an optimum figure of around about 5 billion people. And we're currently at about 7.5 or thereabouts. And that means a reduction of 2.5 billion people. And whatever way I may not even survive that, use the available earth resources for their convenience to have the lifestyle that they desire. And obviously it'll be banded down from the serfs, the very bottom layer of the slaves, to the people who go up the band, and how they actually create those various bands, I don't know. That wasn't in the report, but the report seems to be quite succinct that the optimum figure is between 4 and 6 billion. So you're absolutely right. Anybody who is not engaging with the system and is not productive within the system in one way or another is going to be wasted. I'm complete.
Dave, I just want to let you know, this was a diagram that I had presented initially in draft form and then revised according to some discussion from last week, and then was re-presenting, and I think it just sort of came in at the tail end of that. And we're getting some feedback from Jaswinder and Alex, and I think that's what we've seen so far. I think Thies and Heiner and you have yet to give me feedback, but you may not have gotten the full context. So anyway, that's I think where we are. But I'm looking for either Heiner or Thies to either give me some feedback or for Dave to check in. Or Alex to give feedback.
There's a skills shortage among some members of the team. And I think that's an important point, an important factor that ought to be on a graph somewhere where we can all see it. I mean, it's obvious that if you've got somebody with a skill shortage trying to accomplish a goal that they're not qualified for, it's counterproductive for the vision, the larger vision over.
So I'm not sure where to put that box for now, so I'll leave it here on its own for now.
Yeah, I think that lets me out. I have a skill shortage. Hello, Dave. Would you like to check in? That's a good check-in. I love that.
Let me try this. Either Heiner or Thies or Jaswinder or Alex. I don't know if any of you are motivated to do this, but it would be curious for me to hear one of you present this diagram. And since there's a need to recap it for Dave, I was wondering if one of you might want to do that. It's optional. It's not mandatory. I was just curious to see whether that might be a curious thing to hear.
I'll run it through my computer.
Can you hear me?
Rational.
Both Alex and Thies, I believe, are speaking.
We can hear you and we can see you eating. Over.
Is that Thies or is that someone else? So I heard, Alex, you said you were going to run this through your computer, meaning what, your brain?
Yes.
So were you wanting to take a crack at this, or did someone else want to take a crack at this? Or shall I just recap it in 30 seconds for Dave?
Would you be so kind as to recap it?
I think there's quite a lot there to unpack.
Okay. All right, Dave. Rather than shifting the scale at this, I'm going to briefly recap this just by color, okay? So by color, last week I started here with this box here in the middle, elimination of power culture, which results in wanting to distribute the decision-making process, which brought up the notion of personal agency and personal motivation. But this week I wanted to also back that up with these black boxes here, which is what is the set of conditions around the world that cause us to really think so badly of this thing I'm calling power culture. You know, it's the greed, the power madness, selfishness, corruption, the propagation of a slavery system, which leads to widespread suffering and devaluation of life, which is what we've been creating around the world. And I'm, in a single word, obviously approximating, using this term called the power culture to say, hey, that's not what we want. We want change. We, meaning those of us that see this. So that change comes in some of these forms that I've identified here in the red. We want to bring more compassion, consciousness, evaluation of coexistence, which leads to collaboration, because we don't want power to be concentrated in the few. And for doing collaboration, we really want a compatible set of visions. That's why I really want to emphasize this co-visioning component of barn raising. And so that was one part of the story. The second part of the story is once we get involved in collaboration and co-visioning, then we each have visions, values, missions, objectives that we're each working on. And the real question is, how do we support each other, resonate, amplify each other, cohere, so that we're not wasting each other's time and money and effort, so that we're not working at cross purposes. So we're actually hopefully being more than the sum of the parts. And some of the visions we collected from last week were some of us working on some or all of these things, avoiding self-extinction, eradication of war, eradication of hunger, blah, blah, blah. You can read all that. And if we take a learning / conscious approach to this, which conscious meaning I am doing my best in this case, okay, I just want to rephrase that. The approach is I'm doing my best. I know I'm not perfect. And I'm looking for feedback on how I can improve, which I call the learning method, or AKA the scientific method. And if we do that in our approach to change making, then I would personally ask myself, are there others like me that I can then cohere, resonate, amplify, etc. with? And that's what I'm calling the community of impact. And so here in this diagram, rather than all 6 questions, I'm mostly focused on just the why, the who, and a partial how. The how that is partial says, I'm doing my best, I'm looking for ways to improve, I want to be accountable to myself, I want to be accountable to some close peers. But the rest of it is completely up to me, whether I'm working on malaria, whether I'm working on, water distribution, whether I'm working on better energy sources, et cetera, right? Because all of those things need to be pursued. So that's why I'm doing only a partial how. And that's kind of the way I tell this story. So hopefully now you're kind of brought up to speed, mostly, Dave. So I'm looking for feedback from you, because I think I've heard some feedback from everybody else, but this at least is what I wanted to seed today's conversation with, and then it can go a number of ways. But then after I get this feedback, I'll probably mull on it some more, and I'll probably come back with a different version next week. Over for now.
Are you going to respond, Dave?
I don't have any feedback on this.
Fair enough. Okay.
I got some.
Okay.
There's a group we might want to include that would be willing to input contributions to the effort, and they're bogans, artists, musicians, and they're not the scientific people. They're not following the scientific method per se, but they're people, and we need a lot of people. So everyone included, as Doug would say, we can attract those people as well and have a place for them where they'll feel welcome and comfortable. We should. That's something I think what might be to our benefit over.
I really appreciate. Sorry, go ahead. Sorry, Jacinda.
That's excellent, Alex. The more people, the merrier. Whether it's a scientific method or not, we all employ the scientific method. I'd be interested to hear your version of what the scientific method is sometime. I'm complete. All yours, Sam.
Yeah, the reason I really wanted to thank Alex for that comment is because when I use the term scientific method, I do not mean I only want to talk to scientists. For me, the scientific method in the larger context applies to art, applies to governance, applies to, a number of other things which are not directly considered heretofore science. But as long as you're actually observing, evaluating, learning, and hypothesizing, experimenting, all in the interest of learning and improving, to me, that's the scientific method, the kernel of it. So, whether you're experimenting on interactions between people or organizational dynamics, those are perfectly valid domains. So is art, so is music.
Yep.
So I really appreciate you, because I didn't want that use of the term to turn off huge components of society.
Absolutely.
It's not intended to do that.
Yep.
Thanks. Over.
I've got a saying that I found in the back of a book, music book actually, Happy Days songs. And it was written, I think it was written by Henry Winkler, because he autographed the back page. It says, science, with all its ingenious cleverness and experimentation, cannot tell us much beyond how things are interrelated with each other. It was succinctly described as science is simply the art of measuring and labeling things.
I think that's a woefully inadequate description of science, personally.
Yep.
I think it's sad to have, a consideration that somebody actually believes that's what science is, in my opinion.
See, once you've measured and labeled things, the interpretation of results becomes something else other than science. It becomes something like politics, or collaboration, or consensus. And consensus is not science. Consensus is consensus. So the actual science is the labeling.
Science is also consensus. The test for scientific truth, has a number of sigmas attached to it. Anyway, yeah, that's another conversation, and hopefully I didn't turn off too many people by the use of that term, but I think too many people have a restricted, limited, negative view of the scientific method, and that's what I'm also trying to address. Over. Okay, so thank you for entertaining and humoring me for this diagram, and whatever feedback you're willing to give me. I think I'll let us all look at each other's faces again and actually see if that promotes any thoughts, feedbacks, emotions, actions, or whether we should just move on and collect on some other thoughts. Anyway, to wrap that up, thank you very much for all of the feedback, all the listening, the generosity with which you actually are letting me speak. I really appreciate that. I will now rest for a while.
There's a interesting development happening in the world for people who have a few dollars to invest, because the shift is going from petroleum products to hemp seed oil products. See, like this soap bar is so very fragrant, and it's made out of hemp. These products are already showing up in our supermarkets. There's even a spread with hemp seed oil in it. It's a hazelnut spread. So it's happening, and I think bamboo, the fastest growing plant on the planet, is a good solution to sequester CO2 as well as trees. We're planting lots of trees. But that three-pronged approach might give us a chance to save our arse on this planet, and that is the trees is one of them. The solar shades above the poles is the second one. And the third one is people uniting in the rebellion extinction or something similar to wake up our governments, get their finger out of the dirty oil greedy energy pie. Over.
Yeah, just a brief comment. I live in a state here in the US where cannabis is now legal. So you're driving that street, and years ago you couldn't see this, but now you see them everywhere. You know, the bud stop, you know, cannabis stations. There's a big industry here, and in fact, the best friend of my oldest daughter is in that business, and to my understanding, doing quite well. You know, obviously these businesses are booming now. That's actually a great area for investment, it looks like. And in a number of ways, you know, you're talking about bamboo, hempcrete, from what I know from a lay person's approach, seems to be very promising. Even for clothing, I've seen that around for years already. And for pain medication, and obviously for recreation as well. Anyway, so I live in a state where that's actually quite a booming industry. And so I do see those signs now. Over.
I fixed a problem I was having with arthritis in my joints and my knees and my shoulders, and I did it by stopping nightshade plants. I stopped eating tomatoes and peppers, and I started using hemp seed oil, and the pain's gone. It took about 6 months. Over.
Actually, Alex, from a very personal standpoint, I have an interest in the medical effects of this. Do you know anything about the cancer addressing properties of CBD or hemp or any of that class of medication?
Yeah, I read an article that said nearly every cell in our body has receptors for CBD on them. So if you're putting some into your bloodstream, your cells are attracted to it. They recognize it as a biological part of the system, and they benefit from it. They use it to help them identify proteins and other substances that help them in cell division and growth, identifying foreign objects and things. The CBD seems to help all parts of the growth system. Over.
Yeah, interesting. I'm going to call these oncologists, you know, obviously for my dog, but now it might be a good thing to look into whether that might be a treatment approach for Zeus. Anyway, that's why it was very personal. Thanks for that little digression. Over. What else is on your mind?
Fluoride. The fluoride's affecting children's IQ. There's another study just been released confirming older studies that were bombarded by the fluoride people.
So here's a question. Some of you may have attended Thursday and Friday. I, unfortunately, was unable, as is the case most weeks. Is there a useful recap one of you could provide on Thursday/Friday? Over.
I think of all of the people here, I was the only one who attended both Thursday and Friday. Thursday, we had just a general chit chat, and we moved on to, as happens, consciousness. Friday, we did the Friday experiment, which led, the question was, several questions. The primary question was, what have you learned by being at the GCC over the past 2 years? And that followed on to questions that led up to, what would you like to see happening, or what would you like to be doing for the next year? And the various attendants, Tammy, I, and Dougie, went through the various scenarios. And it transpires that one of the things that we all would like to do is collectively have experiments which lead to improving our spirituality, our awareness. Dougie has reserved his answer for a later date. Tammy is quite happy to go along with the improvement of the spirituality and the experiments pertaining thereto, amongst other things. And this could be in breakout rooms or in just the one room. So the finer details are probably to be arranged. But that's where we ended it yesterday. I'm complete. Back in a mo.
There's a good point I'd like to mention about the spirituality of how the church were treating alcoholics back in the early part of the century. They couldn't get alcoholics sober, and the church would give up on them and stopped helping. Would still serve them soup and that in the alleyways, but they stopped trying to sober them up because it wasn't working. So how did AA work, get 2 million people sober? That was the question. And I think it was because they told the alcoholics who were trying to get sober that they didn't have to follow God or religion. That in the 12-step program, they had to follow a power greater than themselves. And they could call that God if they wanted to, but there were no rules, no hard and fast rules. It was up to each individual how they applied their step work and the program, but at least they had a program. I think that's how it worked. And the face-to-face meetings where the emotion and the pass it on principle worked between individuals in that setting. Someone told me there was a lumberjack up in Canada who got sober without a face-to-face meeting. He just had the book. He was reading the big book of AA. So one trend though doesn't equal one example does not equal a trend. Over.
Thanks, Alex. I actually do have some familiarity because my ex-wife went through the AA program over the course of the last 15 to 18 years. Well, the last 6 of it, I've been at a distance. But before that, I was still living in the same household. So I saw her go through that. And I think it is effective for some. To her, it's almost her church now.
It's true, when an alkie's getting sober and you want to go to the movies or the barbecue and they want to go to an AA meeting, it's pretty hard to convince them not to go with you. They do treat it like religiously, but human beings are like that by nature. People treat sports.
I don't think that's a bad thing. I think that's actually a good thing.
Yeah, in the right setting.
Yeah.
The initial settings is interesting with system design, and I was talking about that with Judge Winder yesterday. If the initial settings are carefully laid down, then the garden will grow well, the plant will flourish. So these guidelines or traditions or principles or steps that you involve with newcomers onboarding can be well designed and wherever possible simplified as much as possible where they can be. Remember Einstein, he said things should be as simple as possible but no simpler. Over.
Yeah, it's with those principles in mind that I really wanted to come up with nothing more than a single one-pager. If I could fit the core ideas into a one-pager and have that make impact, to me, that would be of value. I've done half of that. I think I've shrunk some ideas onto a single one-pager. It hasn't yet had impact though, so I'm still looking for that.
I'll upload that picture I put up about the thinking process, decision process. And it's a question and answer programming box with the symbols, the triangles and the squares. And the lines go yes, no, and you answer the questions, leads you through the diagram to the bottom where it says, okay, you've got your answer. Or somebody a few steps further back dropped out because they didn't answer a question or were ad hominem or spamming or something of that nature. But I'll repost it in the group because I haven't posted it for quite a few months.
Okay. So thank you. I wanted to specifically, though, invite Heiner to see if he had some feedback, because I don't recall yet hearing Heiner's feedback on any of the ideas and diagrams that I was presenting. So Heiner, are you still there or are you frozen? Unfortunately, Heiner appears frozen to me. Ah, you're back.
No, I only stay backstage, so I look like frozen. And your diagram, like always, it's very awe-generating, but also perplexing. I could not read all the details. I just wanted to make sure I stay in touch and that we use our cognition and our tools responsibility. I could not really follow much as I had meetings here besides. But you see my working environment, and it's very stressful, and it's closing down here, so I have to leave. It is always great to see you. My comment is we have to get more women here, and I wonder if one pager is really helpful. It's the same like I make a table of all the skills, as Alex just mentioned. We have to do something with our skills. Otherwise, it is just boxes or it is just possibilities. But we have to go to pointers, to possibilities, to real action. Anyway, I'm mumbling around. I have nothing relevant to say. Thank you.
May I respond to that? Okay, I will respond to that. To me, these conversations are a unique opportunity to share some thoughts. But to me, this is not where the action takes place. The action takes place for me in real life. It takes place in application of some of these ideas that we share in conversation, and then we can take it out and actually apply it to either my job or my other hobby or these other proposals or white papers or investment theses and proposals. I mean, there's a bunch of stuff we each do with the other 160 plus hours of the week that we're not in GCC calls. Maybe it's only 150 plus. Some of us are at 8 hours every week, so it's less than 160 perhaps. But there's a lot of action going on already. I think these conversations, to me, have impact if they change something, however small, about how you would otherwise live during the rest of the week. If they change nothing, then yeah, they're of no value. But I believe that somewhere in your consciousness, some of the stuff that we talk about may be affecting what you're doing, which I think would be a good thing. And like I say, if it doesn't have any impact whatsoever, then I question why some of us would continue to come. Just Winder, please.
Humble apologies for the interruption. Dave, could I ask for your permission to just mention some of the things we've been doing together in the past?
Sure, yeah.
Is that okay?
Yeah.
Thank you. I'm not sure how much you are aware of Dave's recent escapade with his physical and mental well-being. Suffice it to say that currently he is on medication and he's trying to recuperate and recover his old self. Because of the trauma that he's been through, his mind-brain combination and his physical well-being is not 100%. So I've, for want of a better phrase, taken it upon myself to help him along, accelerate his well-being process as much as possible, and as gently as possible, and at the rate acceptable to himself and his wife, etc. Notwithstanding, obviously, his family's feelings, because they are very fond of him, and they want the old Dave back. That's the gist of the conversations with his family members. And in my opinion, they are never ever going to get the old Dave back. But and the proviso here is, it's not a but, the proviso is that what I have learned in the GCC and in the other forums that I've attended has come in extremely handy, useful in implementing the various techniques necessary to help this man and his family and anybody else. And I'm just at the moment relaying it to one particular person. And I think that you're absolutely right, Sam, that the skills that we take on board should be used as soon as possible. And that increases our skills base and our capacity to use them and how to use them. I'm complete. Thank you very much.
Well, Dave, that was actually quite a, I would say, overview of what you've been going through, and hopefully it's not debilitating, but I'm sorry to hear that. But thanks for that recap, Jaswinder. I did not understand. I did not understand that before.
Nice to know, and nice that Dave is here. First time I saw him, I put a question to him to make himself more clear. But now I understand it's okay just being here. So it's okay, no problem. But I wanted to know more from you when I first saw you. But it's okay. So you are, say, on medication or anything, what's in your mind, head, heart, that you have to come out with. So nice that.
I don't have much to say.
Nice to hear that Jaswinder is helping you as much as he feels he is able to. So, and on the thing that I saw from some you showed this diagram, and then I saw many colors. So I have difficulty to focus. So if I would focus just say on the black words or on the green words or the red words, then I would be able to see, to go deeper into an understanding. Now it went too fast, so you showed, because I missed many of the meetings, so I'm new now. So that's so you have shown it a week before, so it's difficult for me to respond so fast, and then so I need more time to see what's inside of it, and especially each word has so much meanings to me, and other words come with it. So that's difficult for me to go through the whole diagram as you did in the beginning.
Well, thanks for that feedback. It will help in my future discussions of some of these ideas. I also think that's, you've hit on one of the key reasons why we record these things, is so that if there is curiosity, we can go back and review what actually happened. In fact, I'm going to personally do that, because in my description of these ideas, I will hear myself and possibly then, be able to use those words to then write some more. So anyway, I'm just reflecting on the fact that if you're curious, this will be posted and this can be reviewed. Over.
One of the Excuse me, I'm got a mouthful. One of the other things I'd like to say is, sometime after we started yesterday's session, Joshua popped in. He'd obviously just come out of bed, and Tammy was just explaining what we were going to talk about in yesterday's session, and Joshua took an exception to that, and he apologized for being late, etc. And then he said he'd just linger in the background and listen. And as Tammy continued, a little while later, she mentioned about people turning up late, and it wasn't a derogatory remark, it's just a remark in passing. But it seemed to upset Joshua. And this time he I think, reiterated about us repeating conversations, and that maybe we wouldn't probably moving forward is at a rate acceptable to him. That's the gist of it. And this time he left the meeting and we didn't see him again. How relevant that is, I don't know. It may be that some of the people are not quite happy with what we're doing. I'm complete.
Well, I don't know how GCC got to be over 1,300 members in Facebook. I really don't. But clearly, out of 1,300 members, we only see, what, maybe 1 or 2 dozen people show up live on these things. So a lot of people really are, I think, monitoring this to see if there is anything useful coming out of it. And I think that's rightly so. People's lives have, limited time. We spend a lot of time here. Some of us are hoping that we do have other valuable extractions that come out of these things. But I can understand the skepticism. I can understand the distance, personally.
Yeah, I'm in that category,
Yep.
I would say.
Yep. In fact, I think I sent out a survey maybe 4 weeks ago leading to the end of this September month, because that's the anniversary number 2 of the GCC proposal being submitted. And so I was collecting, what does GCC represent to you? Is it potentially useful? Is it a place you would like to come? Is it something you learn something from? And I actually appreciate Tisa's or someone else's, someone's honesty, saying, yeah, right now it has no value. There's nothing coming out of it. It's a valuable piece of feedback.
Well, I'm not sure you could say there's nothing come out of it.
So Tisa does want to address
what GCC has had an enormous effect on the way, not just an effect, but an effect on my demeanor, on how I import myself. And I think I'm better equipped to move forward than I was 2 years ago. Even as little as 3 months ago, I would have said, I'm not ready. Not that I'm not worthy, but I wasn't ready. And I was citing things, I was using words like, it's a great responsibility to take on. Having had those conversations, it occurred to me that I may be just exaggerating in my own particular mind what I was saying. So I'm of the opinion that those, I said this yesterday, those who have stayed the course, those who have put the most time in, and Alex is one of them, Sam is one of them, I'm one of them, Tammy, Harry, Joshua to a certain extent. It's kind of like being at college if you miss the lectures, you cannot expect to pass the exam. If we miss the lectures here, the sessions, we will not get the full import of what's being imparted. And we will, if we can't use it because it's half-baked, then whom should we blame? Should we say that the GCC is not doing what it sets out to do? I think GCC has exceeded itself. And I would use your quote, if one person gets or receives the imparted perceptions of the collective, then we will have achieved what we set out to achieve. And I think that one person is more than likely me, if not you and Tammy and Dougie. Dougie's changed a lot. Yesterday he was shining. I've never seen him shine before, which led to the conversation of how our electromagnetic energy can actually be seen by others who are at a sufficiently high level of spirituality, me being one of those. And before I get too much bragging into this session, I'm complete. Thank you. So that negates your rant, Sam. Thank you.
I wanted to share something with.
Hey, Alex, I know that Tees also had his hand up. I'll let the two of you actually decide how to go, though.
I was mentioning what I want to mention. I was reading about a personal development guru course, and he gave me these 3 things to get myself out of a rut or out of a hole of depression. He said the 3 things are: 1, what should I focus on? 2, what does this mean? And 3, what should I do? And when I was able to sit down and think about those 3 things, and they shut everything, shut up the monkey chatter in the back of my mind long enough for me to think of, do something constructive and develop a plan, set a goal, and then start working towards it. Even simple little daily chores, and it started working. That was good. So I'm grateful I found that. What should I do? What should I focus on? What does it mean? And what should I do?
Tees?
Yes, for me, GCC doesn't, I don't feel it as an entity as such. So when yesterday I got a question about malaria from Michael Yosevich, he didn't know I had done some course in epidemiology and maybe better than a medical doctor. So I was able to talk with him about malaria. And then I was able to show him some results that was made by Wageningen University, sponsored by Gates. So this goes outside GCC. This happens because I'm here and meeting the people. So I haven't seen Michael otherwise than here. So it's the networking aspect. So I can't say that it's the GCC. I say just the networking aspect. So it's not on the topics. I choose my topics myself. So now I see the road from the pensioners' money going to an investment fund, investing in a harbor and roads in Brazil, getting the food out for our cows that we eat the meat from. So and now people want to fight against Bolsonaro, but the system is here. We have the pension funds. We invest in the harbor through investment funds. We take the food from Brazil. So it's not seen. So people are angry at Bolsonaro, but he wants his people to get income, and we provide that. And then that's at the cost of the Amazon. So then we have to see the whole chain. So I was able to share that a little bit now in the Netherlands, but they will have a demonstration to the embassy of Brazil, but not to ourselves, eating the cattle that eating the feed from Brazil. So this is not GCC, that's me. But getting the context, because I was able, well, actually John Kelden brought me to this. So John Kelden had a meeting. I brought Vinicius from Brazil to GCC, helped me to connect better with Vinicius in Brazil and get me a focus on Brazil. And now later the fires came in the Amazon. So this is what's happening. It's not GCC, it's just what I pick up from the problems that I see that I can contribute to. So I know I'm influential, but that's short, it's simple things. It's one-on-one. And so seeing some chains of things happening, and that's all. So if I say GCC has no value, it means that it doesn't say I'm inside any framework that I know that GCC is aiming for.
Tease, that very much helps me understand your check mark in that poll. And it actually brings up for me this one notion I have of GCC, which is it's the big town square where people meet after dinner and just spend a couple of hours before they go to bed. You know, they meet some random people, they have random conversations, and if you keep going to the same village square or community square, you may run into some of the same people that you run into before and have follow-on conversations from what you had before. And that's the way a little community or town village square, you know, operates, you know. The town square itself isn't trying to do anything. It's just a place where people have these conversations. So until we decide to make it something else, this little town square notion, this village square notion of what GCC is, that's what applies for me. Over. And thanks for providing that recap. By the way, I may then, because of your explanation, which I so value, I may then reach out to you to see if you know anything about the epidemiology and addressing cancer. You know, that might be something that I would be curious about. Especially the topic that Alex brought up, which is maybe some of the newer approaches like CBD and hemp related.
If I go in such a subject, was one-on-one with Michael Yasevich. So it's also one-on-one in the chat in Facebook. Then I go to the knowledge that I have and the search methods that I have. And then I build up one by one by one by one. I can say so much about hemp, but it's too much. It depends on how the dialogue evolves. So I don't have to say anything. So for malaria, I didn't have to mention the name of the mosquito, but eventually I asked Michael Yasevich now to look at the Anopheles. Maybe he knew that person already. So that's the name of the mosquito. So yeah. It's just fun. So I can play fun with that because too much knowledge and no problem to share the things that are necessary and then not to share what is not ours.
Yeah. No, I was not implying that I wanted that information now. I was hoping to follow up with you one-on-one later. By the way, in 2013, I did a little bit of a collaboration experiment. Those of us that attended a Knowledge Federation conference in Dubrovnik in Croatia in 2012 or 2013, I set up a little knowledge sharing facility with debategraph.org because at the time I had gallbladder pain. And so the doctors were recommending that I have my gallbladder removed. But I wanted to set up a little knowledge management little facility where everybody could help me. Now, it turns out some of the research that was done, and I did some of it, led to discovery of some Eastern approaches. And so I changed my nutrition, I changed my exercise, I took some lemon juice, I took a number of other things, I did a gut biome reset, and the short form of the story is after 5 months, several gallstones had disappeared and only one small gallstone remained in the ultrasound after 5 months, and so I did not go through cholecystectomy. So I saved surgery, and I addressed an issue with non-invasive, non-surgical techniques, because I was able to do a little bit of research with a few other people and come up with an alternative treatment plan. And so I just thought that was an interesting story, and that's what I would like to see more frequently. It's actually a smaller version of another story told by my very good friend Jack Park, who, unlike me, had a much more serious problem. He had actually a life-threatening leukemia issue. And that was 30 or 40 years ago. Through the research that he did and the knowledge management facilities that he put up with, he's still alive. He's now free of that cancer, that leukemia. So those are the case studies I would love to see more of, how we can help ourselves do more of this. Over.
There's a herb in India that seems to affect cancerous growth. There's a region in the east where they use a lot of it, and there's very few cases of colon cancer, or some other forms of cancer are rare as well. They don't eat much red meat, but they use a lot of this spice in their cooking. It's called turmeric. It comes from cumin seed.
Every morning I do put turmeric in my lemon juice and honey, as well as cinnamon and nutmeg, pepper, and a few chili flakes. So I'm doing that.
I wanted to learn more about the turmeric, and they said it works 10 times as more effective if you add black pepper and oil, some kind of oil condiment when you stir fry it. So I did that, and that's been good. You know, part of it's positive thinking too, I believe.
Yeah, I think they call that gold paste, don't they? Yeah.
There's lots of golden honey. There's the nectar of the gods, all sorts. I'm using a sweet chili sauce with turmeric on my artificial meat. I call it my flamboyant chicken slices. They're made from protein that's used in the dairy industry.
Okay, awesome.
Bacteria.
Jaswinder asked me a story, a question at the beginning of this session. Did I have a direction that I was going? And my response is, yes, I do. However, I let the flow of these conversations inform whether or not I actually should steer the conversation or whether I should just let it go. Now, obviously, some people prefer more structure, some people prefer less structure, but I've tried to include as many ideas as possible while still leaning into this direction that I have been thinking about, you know, when the time is appropriate. So it's interesting that you also relayed that story about yesterday and Tammy and Joshua, because I'm curious, because some people prefer these meetings being run a certain way. And that's where I think it's a touchy subject about the kind of agreements we want to make before we assume a structure or no structure. And that is, again, one of these recurring conversations we seem to have in GCC. I was going through a litany of these, you know, with Jaswinder earlier. The inclusion conversation, the onboarding conversation, the recording conversation, you know, the shared memory conversation, you know. We've had a number of these already. There's probably at least a dozen, if not more, of these. Anyway, the agreements conversation is another one of those. Yes, Alex.
There's a conversation that's very important. It's called the primary objective conversation. We lose our sight of our primary objective so easily. because we get sidetracked with these other issues, rabbit holes and whatnot. Over.
Well, we're trying to figure out whether those side issues are part of the primary directive. Because one of the questions that GCC was trying to address is global governance. And to be governance goes all the way down to the fundamental axiomatic level of basic agreements. And then we can build back up. That's one way of doing it. There's a different way, obviously, but that's one way we could be doing it. So to me, eventually, no matter how you go about doing it, sooner or later, you're going to hit this topic of agreements. And I know it's a triggering topic. For me, it's not triggering. For me, it's empowering that we can actually make agreements. Those are good things, in my opinion. The badness comes from what happens if we break these agreements and penalties and liabilities and all this sort of thing, which I think can be addressed among compassionate, reasonable people. But since I introduced the word reasonable, it also means that if we're talking about creating a new society, we cannot always assume that every one of us is well-meaning. Not the least of which is we don't even know what that means. So a well-governed community, in my opinion, has to have a mechanism for dealing with threats, whether they're internal or whether they're external. And the internal threats I'm talking about would be like psychopathic or sociopathic behavior. Without such measures, I think a governance model is incomplete. Anyway, just wonder.
Across all the 4 platforms of the GCC, for a number of months, well into 18 months or more, one of the things that was heard, by me especially, was that we would entertain people who came on board but didn't want to do anything. Okay? Now, it occurs to me there are people like myself who are at a fairly high level of spirituality, religiosity, sociology, psychology, amongst other things, history. I would be what I would class myself as something of a latter age dropout, really, because I can no longer engage with the general public, nor can I engage with the educated, highly educated public anymore. I shall be going next week to see if I can. I will do the utmost that I can to engage. The point here is, there are those who qualify success as gaining the most money, the most power, the most whatever, drinking somebody else under the table, lasting longer on a speed trip, etc., etc. And then there are those of us who are moving down the structure to see what is the bare minimum we need to, 1, survive, 2, live, 3, engage with society and civilization. And I'm one of those, and I'm not the only one. There are others too. So if I decide that I don't or I cannot engage, then I might become one of those who just turns up here and does very little. And that may be seen as that I'm a chatterbox and that I don't engage. Anyway, that's a consideration, and I'm complete on that one. Thank you.
Yeah, Sam, going back to your point about what was it, like a coffee shop or a community where people, town square where people show up. When you show up in a place like that, there's usually no obligation to be the one speaking, and there's no obligation to even have speaking going on. People don't always speak. They can be together without speaking, and they could be drinking their coffee or whatever. And I, for one, would like to see more of that in this community. I'm one of those people who wants to show up and do nothing. Just like those retired guys in the back of McDonald's that you see, or the Starbucks. They show up and they just sit around and talk. That's why I come. I don't want to feel an obligation to contribute, but I don't think anyone should. I think what I look for here is community. I like to hear Jaswinder go on and talk and tell stories about, history or whatever. He and I connect occasionally off one-to-one. For me, I'm not coming from a place of wanting to create a lot of change necessarily in the world. I wanted to create some change in myself, and this is a very low pressure way for me to start to socialize after having been pretty much out of all communication for a long time. So I appreciate it.
Well, given that you want to come up in the relatively listen mode, I appreciate what you just said. You are welcome to listen, react with your eyebrows if you choose.
All right, so we customize the operation manual and see how that goes. We put Sam's plan on the drawing board and we unpack each part, reassemble them in an order that's suggested by the group conscience. This higher power is the group conscience, the thing that gives us democracy, a better way of operating. See, when corruption gets hold of democracy, they leverage it. They can't help themselves. They have to leverage it, and they set it up so that they get elected time after time. And we haven't really got, it's not real democracy at all. It's some kind of electoral college bullshit. Over.
So I'm going to actually add one more remark, and that is, week before last, 2 weeks ago, I had shared a different diagram. It was kind of a mapping of a lot of different things that I've given names to that are my way of embracing and extending Doug Engelbart's ideas. And I laid them out in two axes. One axis was one of scale, and another axis was non-technology versus technology. Now, I've done a couple of these, but this one particular one that I shared, unfortunately, I didn't save. However, the video was recorded, and I had shared it on video. So after I discovered that I didn't share this thing, I couldn't actually incorporate it into this diagram that I showed today. But I'm going to go back to the video and reconstruct it so that I can then reshare it. So I'm personally saying I'm actually happy that the video was recorded, because it now gives me at least a way to reconstruct what it was that I shared 2 weeks ago. Anyway, that's another affirmation for how we can go back and review these things and hopefully extract some value out of it. So I have one action item, which is to invite Tees to advise me And another one is to review the video from 2 weeks ago. And a third is to incorporate the feedback that I heard today in the diagram that I shared at the outset. So those are my minimum actionable takeaways, separate from all the other insights and valuable interactions here. It's my way of possibly introducing a round of checkouts, since we're in the last 26 minutes of our normal 2-hour period. Over.
I had a program that kept crashing, and I eventually realized that if I saved it every few minutes, then it'd crash and it'd be okay. I could restore the work of what I was working on. So, and then the cloud, with the cloud drive, the document I'm working on saved automatically every few minutes on the cloud drive. I've got that.
So I confess to being stupid, because this is a program I've been using for quite a long time, probably over 15 years. The problem being I keep switching computers, and every time I install the program, I have to go back and reset the settings to say automatically make a backup. And this time I forgot to do that setting, so it didn't create a backup, but now I've done it. Okay. So it was an oversight. It's a human systems error. Anyone else with next or last thoughts for today?
I've got to check out a short last thought, and it's about that movie Mission to Mars, an old movie. It had it's a really good ending. The type of film when you walk out of the picture theatre, you're back on the street, and you're still thinking about what just happened because of the overpowering message. It hits you so deeply. Over.
And for some, I can say maybe my time 9 o'clock. So normally we would end this at 7 o'clock. So 2 hours after ending the sessions, I'll be able to connect with you if possible for you. I'm not sure.
Okay, I'll try and do that. I'm actually going to go into Seattle, but I could possibly call you from the road if that's all right.
Okay, if it doesn't make a problem for you.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
So then, well, we'll chat. So we'll see then.
Where are you, Thies?
I'm in Europe, in Delft.
Where?
Near the coast. It's in between Rotterdam and The Hague. So actually, you see it as one greater metropolitan area, and Delft is the center of it. So two suburbs.
Okay.
One is The Hague, and the other is Rotterdam.
I know it. Yeah.
And Dave, I think I did ask you, but I forgot. What time zone are you in?
I'm in St. Louis Central Time.
Ah, that's right. That's right. Near my youngest brother. That's right.
So Delft, you said, Thies? So I think of Vermeer when I think of Delft.
When I think of St. Louis, I think of Take Me to the Ball Game.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a baseball town.
And barbecue?
Yeah. And jazz. And blues, I'd say. Probably blues more than jazz. And gun violence. And racism.
Very close to Ferguson?
Very American town, yeah. St. Ferguson is in St. Louis, so it's in the county, near the airport.
How would I go walking around there with a T-shirt on that said, "I don't give a freaking shit what color you are"?
Well, thank you for hosting, Sam. I'll leave on that note.
Thanks again for engaging. Any other last or next thoughts? Going once. Going twice. Have a great rest of weekend.